workplace issues, but the majority of the folks that we work with are immigrant workers, because those are the communities that are most vulnerable to exploitation in low-wage jobs like agriculture, restaurant work, construction, hotel housekeeping, all of these sorts of jobs that help to sustain and grow our economy, not just here locally, but also nationwide. Working directly with immigrants, you know, I gotta be very honest, it's a challenging time for our organization, for these communities that we work with. People are terrified. And I wish I could say it was without reason. What I want to do here today is talk a little bit about the sort of current status of immigration policy, which is sort of changing on a daily basis. So it's pretty hard to keep up with, and not everyone can be an immigration policy expert. I myself am just coming back from vacation, so I've had to kind of get up to speed just in the last few hours. So I will do my best. The thing is, nothing about immigration law has actually changed since Trump's inauguration. What we're seeing right now is an outgrowth of decades of misguided and inhumane lawmaking vis-a-vis immigrants in this country. Many of the sort of much of the legal architecture for the immigration enforcement actions that we're seeing and that are being promised by the Trump administration were actually created in provisions of the 1996 Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, the acronym of which is unpronounceable. That was enacted under Bill Clinton's administration. So nothing about the laws have changed, but we've been living for a very long time with a broken immigration system that is designed to separate families, make it harder for people to obtain asylum than it should, a system that detains an inordinate number of immigrants, often in private prison facilities, and that has really just profoundly expanded the range of criminal convictions, including low-level nonviolent convictions that make somebody deportable, that are considered deportable offenses. It's also kind of set up this framework for fast-track deportations. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about what all of that means in a moment. So the thing about this is that because we have these pretty unfortunate laws, we expect that there may be some changes coming down the road in terms of immigration law. But right now, what we have is a situation where Trump has, in fact, very broad legal authority over the enforcement of these existing immigration laws. And different presidents have chosen to enforce these immigration laws in different ways. He campaigned on a platform of mass deportation, and as we were seeing through both his executive orders and his administration's implementation memos, he's very much committed to following through on these campaign promises. Over the weekend, some of you may have read that the media obtained 2 leaked memos that specifically outline how the federal government plans to implement the president's recent executive orders on immigration. Now, the feasibility of these measures is going to depend very largely on congressional funding, right, which is where some of our action items could focus, and also on the outcome of inevitable legal challenges that will play out in the courts. So just in terms of what these memos contain, I'm going to just outline 5 areas where we can expect to see some pretty alarming impact. One is an end to some of the long-standing protections that have existed for children. So the Department of Homeland Security intends to strip many children who arrive alone at the border of basic protections, and in fact is aiming to penalize their parents for seeking to reunite with their children in the United States. So essentially what they're trying to do, what they're trying to do is narrow the definition of what the federal government calls an unaccompanied alien child, what most of us advocates call unaccompanied minors, to limit the protections that would apply to that group of immigrants. And they're looking at launching either civil or criminal enforcement actions against parents of unaccompanied minors who are border crossers if they're helping to get them into this country. Second, we can expect to see a massive expansion of detention. The memos contemplate a massive expansion of detention, including a requirement that the Department of Homeland Security officers detain nearly everyone they apprehend at or near the border. Currently, we simply don't have the space for that. This detention space expansion, which would certainly be a boon to the private prison industry, means that more children, more families, and other vulnerable groups, including asylum seekers seeking protection in the United States, will end up detained at great cost, both financially and at great human cost. What we're also seeing is that prosecution priorities and discretion are being eliminated. So these new memos rescind earlier policies that really have prioritized who to prosecute and deport and who can be deprioritized because they don't pose a threat to our community. So the Obama administration had sort of 3 levels of priority, which, to be honest, were pretty terrible. But right now, essentially, everyone is considered a priority, which is much worse. So these new enforcement priorities are extremely broad. They cover nearly everyone who's undocumented in the United States, and they can even include people who are simply charged or suspected of having committed a crime. So when we talk about these sort of deporting criminals, and these are the people we're going to focus on, they're essentially characterizing everyone as criminals who is undocumented, as well as a great number of people who are legal permanent residents and have other types of status. So fourth, we can expect, or what we're facing is the prospect of the expansion of the deportation force. The memos order the hiring of 5,000 additional Customs and Border Protection agents, Border Patrol agents, and 10,000 additional Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, which would focus on the interior enforcement aspect. So this is where the funding piece comes in. We want to oppose any funding for this, as well as obviously things like the border wall. The memos also direct a massive expansion of this program called 287G. I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but this is essentially a program that was operational for many years and was very, very problematic. Do you guys remember Sheriff Arpaio? This is an example of a 287G program. Trump wants to expand this. That would essentially allow the Department of Homeland Security to deputize state and local law enforcement officers to perform the functions of immigration agents. You would not want your local police like auditing your taxes, which is the job of a federal agency. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's believable, unfortunately, but it's pretty incomprehensible how local law enforcement agents are supposed to understand what is really an incredibly complex area of law. They're not trained to do it, they're not funded to do it, and they don't have a mandate to do it. So this is certainly an area of profound concern. Fifth, we're seeing in these memos plans to bypass immigration courts and really short circuit due process. So right now what we have, one of the things that advocates have working in our favor is that our immigration courts are incredibly backlogged. So there are folks who have pending immigration cases that are many years out, and in the meantime maybe living in this country under supervision and maybe with an ankle bracelet, but they're able to buy some time through this backlog. But what they're talking about doing is trying to expand the number of people who could be subject to expedited deportation without ever going before a judge. Well, we do expect all of these things to come before legal challenges, so we will see the outcome of this. So essentially this expansion of expedited removal will allow the government to bypass the backlogged immigration courts in order to deport people more rapidly with little to no due process. So it's a pretty grim situation. And I think one of the things that we're coming up against is just how much, because information is constantly sort of changing, and there is this really very, the rumor mill is kind of wreaking havoc on communities as well. And what we're seeing is that people are getting inaccurate information about what their rights are or